All right, I'm going to ask everyone to take a seat. Actually, we're going to take a deep breath and a mindful moment because, well, first of all, I want to say I see so much joy here to see people seeing each other for the first time in person. So that's just lovely, and we're going to make sure there's plenty of time for you to interact. This is not a boring, like, sit down the whole time training. You are going to play, you are going to connect, and that's what we do with our young people. So my name is Mara Mincer. I'm the Executive Director of Growing Up Boulder, and we are going to be talking about how child-friendly Boulder is actually a sustainable, equitable, and resilient Boulder. So I'm going to ask everyone to close their eyes and put their feet on the floor. Okay. And then I'm going to ring the chime in a second to let you know it's time to start, and I'll ring it again to end it. And this is just a chance to land, to let go of everything that took to get here, because I know it's hard to get here, and just to breathe, okay? So. All right. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Kathy Hill. I'm Growing Up Boulder's Education Director, formerly with Boulder Valley School District as a teacher.
And remember to come on over here, because we're just so you know, we're videotaping this for your colleagues who can't be here today. So this is not amplifying our voices. This is, but it's recording it.
Okay, so take two. And my name's Kathy Hill, and I'm Growing Up Boulder's Education Director. So happy to see everybody here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm also happy to see all of you here today. I'm Luciana Escrivens. I am Growing Up Boulder's Participatory Planning Associate.
Okay, bienvenidos. Gracias por venir hoy día. Estamos muy alegres de verlos. It's nice to know what you're in for today. This is the schedule of the day. We're going to introduce Growing Up Boulder and ourselves. You'll also get to introduce yourselves to each other in an activity. We'll talk about UNICEF and child rights and how that relates to all of you. We will take a break. We're going to have 2 breaks today, 8-minute breaks, because it's just the right amount of time. We'll talk about how Growing Up Boulder partners with the city and can work with all of you. And then we'll talk about the key principles we've learned from our 14 years of doing this work around engaging with young people, so you also can use them. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll finally talk about how Growing Up Boulder, the city, and Child-Friendly Cities, or the Child-Friendly City Initiative, which you'll hear a lot about, interact. And then we'll wrap up Growing Up Boulder and how we're working in the community. But then we want you to be able to appreciate and articulate the value of making Boulder a child-friendly city. Whether or not you have your own kids, whether or not you care about kids, I'm hoping by the end of today you will be convinced that kids matter. Friendly cities resulting in more equitable, healthier, and sustainable communities for all ages. And our mission is to offer young people opportunities to participate, deliberate, and influence local issues that affect their lives. Now, we do this through a partnership. We were based out of the University of Colorado up until 2 years ago, when we left to become a nonprofit program under the fiscal sponsorship of something called the Colorado Nonprofit Development Center, so CNDC. So essentially we operate like a nonprofit now, and we partner very closely with the City of Boulder and with the Boulder Valley School District, as well as up to 50 nonprofits locally and internationally. And you can find us now at the Boulder Public Library. So that's a picture of our office. You can see us there. And you know, we love to interact with you and meet you in many different fields of study. And this can be really confusing when it comes to foundations or traditional institutions that can be very siloed. But when you look at a child is not divided out into these different parts. And so it could be positive youth development. It could be early childhood. It's resilience and sustainability. It's child-friendly cities. it's education in the schools using project-based work, and it's civic engagement and democracy. And the way our model works is there's sort of three key parts that we've developed over the years. We start by establishing children as the experts in their own lives, right? They have lived experiences that are so valuable that we want to hear. So we capture those, and we'll teach you how, before we can influence them. But we say, this is the city project that we're working on. Like maybe it's the North Boulder Library. Here's what it's about. Here's what you can expect to happen with your input. And now it's your turn. And so we turn it over to them to increase their competence. So they do research, and you know, this could be a second grader going out and doing research on the internet, but it could also be doing interviews with key people who know about this field. And then finally, the kids synthesize their original ideas and what they've learned, and they share that with decision makers, people in power who can actually act upon what they've heard. And we also create a report from Growing Up Boulder that can also go to accompany the kids' voices. And that's really how it works. Did you want to? Okay. Smattering of what we've affected or worked on in Boulder. Policing and safety. We're working on that right now, the police master plan. Transportation, the transportation master plan, and many other projects. Housing, dense, affordable, sustainable housing from an 8-year-old's perspective. Parks and recreation master plan. Nature connection, right? How do we get kids to connect to nature? And then healing from tragedy, which unfortunately we've had to deal with the King Soopers shooting. We spent 2 years working on this as a major project. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Kath.
Today's training. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, you can go to growingupboulder.org and then go to the resource tab, and there's a drop-down menu that takes us to all the reports. As Mara said, you know, we work with children and youth, and then we capture all those ideas, and then we share them out with city decision makers, and all those reports can be super interesting to see what children and youth have thought about. So we're going to do a getting to know each other activity. It's called Wheel Within a Wheel. Does anybody know this? Awesome. Okay, so the way it works is, first of all, Wheel Within a Wheel is a focused listening activity that you do with a partner or dyad. And we're going to create 2 wheels, an inner and an outer wheel. And to create that, we're going to count off by 1s and 2s. So Laurel, if I can put you on the spot and you can be a 1, and then we'll just do 1, 2, 1, 2 throughout the room, starting from this side and just moving over to this side, and then I'll give the next direction.
1, 2.
Next table?
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
Darren?
1,
2. 1, 2.
1, 2.
1, 2.
1, 2. 1, 2. 2. 2. 1, 2. 1.
Now hold your number in your hand so that you don't forget it. And here's the next direction. All the 1s stand up without speaking. 2 stay silent. And follow Luciana. What did you talk about? Would anybody like to just begin? Lauren. I'm sorry, Laurel.
Okay, I respond to that too. We talked about the simplicity that children's perspectives bring. A lot of times in the city, we tend to overcomplicate things. Just bringing that purity of essence and that, kind of unjaded perspective where they don't have to worry or think about some of the things that adults do in the sense of, what's the impact on my coworkers, or how am I going to balance that with my job and my work, just all these different perspectives that they just bring this pure essence.
Yeah, this pure essence, that simplicity, I completely relate to that. What else? What'd you talk about? Yes, Juanita.
We talk about the value of their creativity and how they can dream big and far without putting limits to it. So the spontaneity, and also they are looking at the world from a different perspective, which is Randy also.
That's right.
They can give us a lot of things on how to move forward.
Thank you so much. Creativity and spontaneity are definitely things we see when working with children and youth. Anything else? Yeah.
You brought up a really great perspective that from climate initiatives, that kids are the generation that's receiving the impact that we have on the environment and how they can contribute to climate now and actually getting their hands dirty and being a part of like the environment.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I spoke with Sarah, who is in city planning, and she had mentioned that how important it is to let kids know that they can have a voice and be an active participant in government and civic engagement, and that's something that should continue throughout their lives. And so introducing it early, that's something that they can be a process.
You're speaking my language. That's exactly right. You know, we give kids so much empowerment and respect when we ask them what they think now, not when they're 16 or 18 or 21 at some arbitrary time, right? They can be involved right now. Okay, Mary.
We think children and youth voice matters. Here's a collection of what we've come up with over the years of working. So, as Kathy was saying, we don't have to wait for them to turn 18 to matter. They matter right now. They are current community members right now experiencing our community. It also makes sense to include the end user in the end result, right? Like, kids know how they're actually going to be using the space. And I can tell you at my age, in my late 40s, I don't know how they want to be out interacting. It's changed a lot since when I was a kid. A city that's friendly to children is a city that's friendly to all. So if we are building a sidewalk that has a ramp, that works for someone on a skateboard. It works for a parent pushing a stroller. It works for someone using a wheelchair or a walker, right? It's many different ages. It's people with disabilities. It's also other species. We found our kids think a lot, and talking about climate initiatives, they think about plants and animals in all of their designs. It's quite amazing. Talked about them being flexible. Also, we have directly seen the benefits of dialogue. I have seen intractable city issues. I'm thinking of Thunderbird Lake, for those of you who are around then, in Fraser Meadows. We have seen intractable issues shift and move forward when kids were part of the dialogue, because it's much harder to demonize a kid when you're face to face and you actually start listening and being on better behavior. And then finally, the enthusiasm of our young people is completely contagious. You can usually not leave a classroom and be in a bad mood afterwards, at least if it goes well.
Just a few of the 100+ examples to wet your whistle a little bit, and you may find that you heard about these examples throughout the last few years. Let's start with this one, the civic area, right? So from 2012 to 2015, we worked with 225 children and youth to find out what they imagined in a newly imagined civic area, okay? And this slide shows their thinking by using 1, 2, and 3 pink dots, right? So some of their popular, the most common, frequently asked for reimagined ideas for this era would be the interactive art and the safe and more access to the creek and places to hang out and separated bike paths, which many of these things did happen. The CFC map, child-friendly city map, as Mara mentioned, was the first bilingual child-friendly city map in the nation. And we also have a teen-friendly digital map also that you can find on our website. Over there by Angela, we have the child-friendly city maps. If you want to take one, it's the 4th edition. The 5th edition is coming out in May. So we'll run 20,000. We've been running about 10 to 15,000 maps each year. And we're going to publish 20,000 more this year because they've become so popular for local families and for visiting families. And then 6,000 will go home with elementary school kids in Boulder Valley School District. Oh, I forgot to say about the child-friendly city map. 700 families and children, and 52% of the families and children we worked with were from marginalized communities. So that really keeps with our mission to find out what all demographics think about how Boulder can be a child-friendly place. Okay, so have you ever heard of the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities? That was something that came out in 2015, and the city of Boulder was asked to participate. And it's our understanding that Boulder was the only city who engaged children and youth in finding out what they felt about a resilient future.
We were the first city. We started a trend.
Okay, thank you, Mara. Okay, the next one is the NOBO Library, the North Boulder Library Project, and we worked with 260 kids from Boulder Journey School, from Crestview, from Foothills, and they made recommendations on 5 different areas. Sometimes the city will say, here's a project and we want to know this from children and youth. And sometimes there's a project where they say, we want to know anything they think, right? In this example, they wanted to know about an outdoor plaza, an outdoor makerspace, an indoor makerspace, a community learning garden, and an outside playground. And so students followed that Growing Up Boulder model where they researched libraries all over the world, they researched those 5 elements, and they came up with their recommendations.
And can I just say one really cool thing about that?
Yeah?
Boulder Library Foundation just got a $700,000 grant from Colorado Health Foundation to build all those spaces. Why did they get it? The kids' voices. Literally the reason we got that grant was because of the kids' voices and also other outreach for adults that have been done in that local community. And the foundation said, you're ready to go, and we see the impact, do it. So I just want to say, this has financial consequences.
Yay. That's awesome. Okay, a couple more. The next one is a project we've been working on off and on for a couple years. It's the Reimagining Policing Master Plan process. And we've had just about 400 students from 3rd grade to 12th grade interacting with finding out what could make Boulder a safer place and feel better in regards to policing, right? I believe that the plan is going to go to City Council in July, so we should be seeing some very concrete plans soon. The next,
Darren has a question.
yeah.
I've never seen this data, so what was the question that you asked them? What are these the results of? These categories?
So these categories came from that 3rd grade classroom at Whittier, and we did this activity that we're going to do today called Place It, or City is Play by James Rojas, and we asked them, what makes for a child-friendly city, a place that you feel safe and comfortable? And these are some of their responses. Yep. They always mention pets. Good question, thank you. The next one was the healing from the King Soopers tragedy project, and we worked on that for a couple years. We're just finishing up, really. We were approached by the Community Foundation of Boulder County, who said to us, gosh, we've had so many adults come to us with proposals of what would be healthy for adults to heal from the tragedy, but we haven't had anybody come up with proposals for what children and youth need, right? Super important question. So we submitted a proposal and we're successful. And so what we did was we worked with 21 area high school students. They formed the Youth Leadership Healing Committee. And we worked with a partner, Maya Soul Dancy, who's a licensed therapist, among other traits, skills. And we talked, we had multiple sessions talking about trauma and healing and wellness. And what came out of that was their desire to host a community event, which we had around the anniversary of the tragedy last year. We had it at BMOCA in the second floor of that museum space, and it was incredible. We had toddlers up to 91-year-olds interacting with these healing activities that the students on the committee selected and developed and facilitated, right? And then it was so successful that the Museum of Boulder said, hey, can we have this as an exhibit in June and July? Of course we said yes. And then we took it, and in August we turned it into a toolkit so that student leaders and educators in and out of schools could use it as a tool, a wellness tool, right? And so Boulder Valley has now adopted it as part of their curriculum, and we're having an April training at Boulder Valley School District for the community and for any Boulder Valley School District educators. And we have 2 young women who are on the committee who are going to be facilitating with us. Okay? It's awesome. Okay? And then eco-healing, a term that we came up with, ecology and healing in response to the Marshall Fire. Essentially, what are the ways that children and youth can cultivate resilience and emotional safety while living in this wildfire-prone area that we live in, right? Darren knows this project because she led it for Growing Up Boulder. Do you want to just say
I'll say
a few things?
Can I? Yeah. So it was wonderful. It was initially in response to the Marshall Fire, but like Kathy said, the presence of the possibility of fire is just everywhere. So we were asking young people how connecting with nature can best facilitate their emotional resilience in that light. Like, do they want to do more programs? Do they want just self-led opportunities? Do they want more facilities, signs, outdoor art, all these things, and got really good feedback for OSMP, for parks, on how we can facilitate that.
Yeah, and the cool part was that that CU was involved. You want to tell them about the ENVD students?
Yeah, it was fantastic. So the environmental design program at CU was involved from the very beginning and developed a design studio to take the youth feedback that we had gathered and turn it into some conceptual designs that were grounded in the Marshall Fire site that would kind of realize those ideas from the young people. And then at the very end, it was the best, maybe one of the best days of my life, second to having kids in there. Was to have some of the young people, the 4th graders from Whittier, they got to travel to CU and hear the CU students present their ideas, and they got to interact, and it was amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, we feel really grateful to be involved in all these projects. Each one just has a heartwarming element, and to be able to elevate youth voice in these ways has.
Okay, so we need to think about the bigger picture and go back a little bit to understand everything that we're working and doing with the city. So let's go back and remember a little bit about the United Nations and UNICEF. So the United Nations, as you all know, is an international organization that was founded in 1945, and it's made out of 193 member states. And its goal is to discuss common problems and find shared solutions. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the first legal document signed in 1948 to set out the fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and it's the foundation of all international human rights law. Then another word that I bet everyone here has heard before is UNICEF. UNICEF is the United Nations Children's Fund, and it's an agency of the United Nations responsible for providing humanitarian and developmental aid to children worldwide.
And I just want to jump in to say, the reason we're talking about this, the reason all this matters is everything that's going to follow today around child-friendly cities originates from these seeds.
Back there, yeah. So what are human rights? Those are minimum standards that recognize and protect the dignity of all human beings. Human rights belong to each and every one of us equally, and they are inherent to us all regardless of our nationality, sex, ethnic origin, color, religion, or any other status. So, the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child is an agreement signed by countries who have promised to protect child's rights. Raise your hand if you know which is the only country that haven't signed that agreement. Which one is it? It's the US. The United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child explains who children are, all their rights, and the responsibilities that government have towards them. They are based upon the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And all those rights are connected, are all equally important, and cannot be taken away of any child. So this is a really nice poster with from the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. It's a child-friendly poster, and we have a printed version back there that we will be using to do an activity. Each one should have a copy on your tables, and feel free to take that with you when we're done. So now, what is a child-friendly city? So a child-friendly city is a city, town, or community in which the voices, needs, and priorities and the rights of children are a part of every policy, program, and decisions being made. A child-friendly city incorporates non-discrimination, youth participation into all steps. So child-friendly cities initiatives are communities that take the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child and apply it to make it real. So let's learn a little bit about child-friendly city initiatives around the world. Since its creation in 1996, CFCI have been adopted over 3,000 municipalities in over 40 countries, and it's impacting an estimated of 30 million children and youth worldwide. This framework has a global footprint with a very impressive track record. Now, this is the first cohort of cities that are making the difference in the lives of nearly 1 million children around the U.S. The city of Boulder is really close to be a part of all this first cohort of child-friendly city initiatives. And Denver and Alton, Illinois are also considering joining. So to keep us inspired, let's watch one video before we continue and we do the child-friendly city, the child rights activity.
They say children should be seen and not heard. They say they'll understand when you're older. You're just a kid. But a kid swam for 3 hours on the open sea to save 18 lives and became an activist for refugees. A kid broke through barriers to keep migrant families together and delivered a message of hope. Let us fight with love, faith, and courage so that our families will not be destroyed. The kid was forced to kill in a brutal civil war and became a human rights activist, free other children from violence. A kid fought for girls' right to education, was shot in the head in retaliation, and won the Nobel Prize.
This award is not just for me. It is for those forgotten children who want education, who want peace, who want change.
And power, inspiring a historic movement against climate change.
We kids shouldn't have to do this. I wish that the adults would take their responsibility and do this instead. But since no one's doing anything, we have to.
Kids are speaking up. Kids are demanding their rights. Kids are acting now for better tomorrow. What will you do?
What will you do? You're allowed to tear up or cry a little bit after this video. We all do. Okay, so now we will do another activity. Each one of you should have the child's rights sheet of paper on your table. You can take one. Take a moment to look at it. And then select one right that personally matters to you. Then you'll write it down on a sticky note, and you can also write why that right matters.
I'm actually just going to have us do a cleansing breath, actually. And the reason, and I want to name why I'm doing this, I'm naming this because we were realizing this was a pretty emotional activity, the last piece we did. And so we want to take care of ourselves, right? And so one of the ways we can do this is with breath. So I'm just going to ask you to close your eyes. If you feel comfortable, if you don't, you can keep your eyes open, but keep them soft. Take a deep breath in and breathe in peace. And then let out any stress. Just let it go out. And then take in one more breath for yourself. And then your out breath, share it with the group. Share that care and sense of community with the group. Okay. Oh, that's a good question. Erica said, okay, so we're going to finish. She said, what do you mean by the group? Sometimes in this world that it's very vague. What you mean is you're breathing in sort of caring for yourself, but you can also breathe out sharing sort of that care with others and that concern with others. Because actually we are social beings and we're all connected. And when you recognize that, it actually builds resilience. There's a lot of research around that. Our colleague who's a mental health professional says it better than me, so I'm going to get the exact wording. This was kind of impromptu, but I'm going to build that. Luciana was very emotionally intelligent and said, let's build that into our next training. So thank you, Luciana.
Mara,
Yeah.
the library has one book, one Boulder, the Mission of Joy with Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, and they were just, I'm getting into it. But they also talk about that when you can think kind of the interconnectedness and beyond yourself, that brings happiness to you too, and brings resilience.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Kate. Beautiful. All right, and so with that, I just want to ask, wrapping up from that last section, are there any questions or reflections so far? Just want to pause and make space for that. Yes, Charlotte.
When were these rights of the child developed, and when did
Yeah.
other countries?
Yeah. So the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is that treaty that was ratified by every country except for the U.S., that was in 1989. And that's when these rights were all established. Obviously, they're much more wordy, but this is the kid-friendly version. That's when they were established. And then they started really applying it and really figuring out how to make it real by 1996, when they started having these child-friendly city initiatives. And so one of the things I'll talk about is that there are countries that have been doing this for many years in terms of really looking at child rights. We don't talk about that here in the U.S. so much, but that's what Growing Up Boulder was trying to do from the beginning, and now we're really going to get to take it to the next level with the full process. Yeah, yeah. And Kate.
I was wondering, when you engage kids, is it usually separate from adults, or is it sometimes combined?
Great question. So when we engage kids, is it just kids or with adults? It depends. We usually work specifically with children, but we often bring in adults. One thing that we learn over and over again is we need to train our adults on how to work with the kids, right? Because they often come in with their adult way of doing things, and that doesn't work so well. And I've learned it. I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. So when we bring them in, we really make sure that they're versed in how to do it. And then we love intergenerational dialogue. That actually is something we've done many times as well. Yeah. And actually, I hope this next part, okay, I'll go to Angela in one sec, answers some of this too, because you'll actually see more about how we do this. And yeah. Okay, Angela. Angela.
My comment is that I appreciate just the sensitivity that the previous activity brought up to all of us. I mean, just from the video, I teared up. And I just think that it's beautiful, that reminder that, as Edgar said, like, I was once a child, you know, like, so I feel like that just is that little kid still inside of us that make us feel connected to what we're talking and want us to name it so that we continue to allow that little kid inside of all of us to guide us in our work and then the rest of our team.
Thank you, thank you. And we're giving those kids a voice. Our younger selves that maybe didn't get a voice, this is our chance now. Okay. So I want to talk about how Growing Up Boulder and the city work together. Like, how does this actually work? But first we have to take a little step back and see how did we get to where we are today. I'm going to make this as acronym-free as possible, and I tried to simplify, but it's a complicated story. Essentially, before Growing Up Boulder, the University of Colorado had something called the Children, Youth, and Environment Center, or CYE. And it later turned into the Community Engagement Design and Research Center, or CEDAR Center. This is relevant. So this is where Growing Up Boulder was born out of when it was CYE, and then over time we turned into CEDAR, which is now based out of the Program in Environmental Design, right? So we came with sort of an urban planning hat on. But some of the people who started this center had done work around child-friendly cities, child rights, and so they really had that global mindset. And so in 2006, they started the Denver Child-Friendly City Initiative. Now, you have to remember, there was no U.S. ratification of this treaty. Like, the U.S. was not doing child-friendly cities. But they said, we're not going to wait for the U.S. We're professors. We're going to study what this looks like in other countries. We're going to write white papers on it. We're going to develop instruments that look at children's participation, and we're just going to do it. And so they did it for about 3 years in Denver, but it kind of fell apart after a while for a variety of reasons. I moved to Boulder in 2008, and then in 2009, I helped start Growing Up Boulder with David Driscoll, BVSD, and the city of Boulder. Well, sorry, I'm missing one, CU, right? So I came with CU. So we tried to pick up where Denver left off and say, what lessons were there learned? How do we create this child-friendly city initiative in Boulder with the best tools we could do? Okay, so I talked about that the CFCIs were started, child-friendly city initiatives were started in 1996. UNICEF USA, which is separate from UNICEF Global, it's its own nonprofit, did not start doing child-friendly city initiatives until 3 years ago. Growing Up Boulder, and myself and also Pamela Ritt, who helped run Denver's Child-Friendly City Initiative out of CYE, we actually helped UNICEF create this framework they're using now. Because UNICEF said, well, we've heard of this thing in other countries, but we don't really know how to do it here. And I said, do you know all these people have spent years of their career working on it? And UNICEF said no. So we put them together, and that is literally what you are going to be working with today. So like, this was formed here in Colorado, a lot of this. Pretty cool. Yeah. And so, and then just the last piece is now that Growing Up Boulder is is a nonprofit. And so that's how we went from CU to CNDC and how this all evolved and why, again, there's, like we were talking about child-friendly cities, and we've sort of been one, but now it's becoming more official, and we'll show you what that means. But how do we choose projects, right? Like, you've heard of all these projects we've already done. How did we get there? When we first started, the way we tried doing it was asking our young people. We created these action groups and events, and we said, what do you care about? And so we heard some different things. But we realized we weren't reaching underserved groups of kids so well. And we really wanted to elevate the groups that we weren't hearing from. So we turned our model on its head, and we said, we're going to come to you. in your classrooms, in your after-school places. And we are actually going to bring city issues where you can actually make a huge impact and ask you what you think on them and make sure we're translating between kids and adults, right? And so that's more of our model today. The way it works right now, if you want our services, is we work with Ryan's team, so communication and engagement. He will send out an email to all of your departments saying, hey, what would you like youth voices on? What would you like to get youth voices on? Which projects? You send them to him, and then we meet up and say, which projects will have the biggest impact on our kids and our community? What's a good fit with our expertise? And then we try and give different departments a turn so people get these services. And then when we are able to, we will contract additionally with other departments if we have the capacity and if you have the money to be able to work together. And so that's how we do our work. And when we create a project, it is co-created. It's not just us, it's not just you, it's us together with those people who are working with the kids, because we work differently with different groups of kids, like in school and out of school, two very different animals. And so we really co-create the projects together. And I will just say, I'm not sure if anybody in here, but does the person who was a growing up Boulder child want to say anything? And if so, that person may stand up, and if not, it's fine.
I can get a few comments. We don't want to miss this week. Come on.
Yeah, come on. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you're so amazing that I can't help it. So come on up.
Thank you. Well, yes, as you heard, I was a participant in 5th grade with Growing Up Boulder. Created a digital narrative that captured what I envisioned the hill to look like. I think I was maybe 9 or 10 years old at the time. And so it was really, a unique experience to be working with someone that actually asked me for my input, because I never got to do that. Usually adults were telling me what I should be doing. So it was a really unique opportunity, and I think it's just an amazing experience to have. And it provides so much more perspective for adults. I remember Debbie, who was working with me, saying, now what I would have thought. Like, I thought the hill, at that time, I thought it was full of trouble, and I was scared to go up there and intimidated by all the college students there. And so, but for adults, it was the most affordable part of Boulder. It was, it had a unique character. So just getting a different perspective, and what I wanted to see at the hill was completely different too. So it's really meaningful to bring in those voices, bring in the creative side of things, using digital media, different forms of communications to get that out there. So I hope to see that in other departments and different projects at the city as well. But yeah, did I cover that?
Thank you. Yeah, and what do you do for a living now? Community engagement.
Right.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. Okay. The other thing that Growing Up Boulder does is capacity building, right? So we are here today teaching you. We do this actually with communities around the world. People hire us to do these sort of workshops. And we also, I think one way we'll be moving forward is by helping coach departments, right? So less of us always doing and all of you doing, so that there are more people who can do this work. I don't want us to be the bottleneck. And we have a lot of knowledge and resources to help support you. And then finally, we are coordinating with Darren and also with Elizabeth, child-friendly cities and this framework in our city right now, which is what the rest of today is going to be talking about. So that's the other piece Growing Up Boulder does. Right now, we have a steering committee that has met since the beginning, where it used to be every month, now it's every few months because we're so busy. You're all invited to come. It's where we talk about what are the projects that we're working on together. We all take turns sharing. And then there's an element of networking as well. And we bring in a lot of community partners, nonprofits. And people love the chance to share what they're working on. And there's just a lot of networking that happens. And I assume that will continue and probably get more robust as we move forward. So we're going to talk about what are these 6 principles of engagement? How do we approach this work? And this has been developed based on our reading and knowledge, but also just on tried and true experiences of our 14 years. So the first piece is that we start with equity. We center equity. Okay, I'm going to give you a disclaimer. Don't try and read the small print. It'll give you a headache. The idea is to do soft focus and just kind of see the essence of it, and then we're going to send these slides out and you can pore over it, okay? So on the right, you'll see the wheel of power and privilege. That's a beautiful visualization of how power is centered in certain identities, right? And we all fall in different categories depending on which piece of the pie you're looking at. And so we start to look at, well, who's marginalized based on power? And how can we make sure we are reaching those who have been marginalized by our community and our society and start with their voices? And so Growing Up Boulder actually creates what we call an equity matrix, where we look at, okay, whose voices do we have to make sure we want to hear? And then we figure out who represents them. What are the organizations? So for example, the Police Master Plan, we wanted to hear from young men and women of color. So we worked with the ELLOS program from El Centro Amistad, and we worked with the Generations program from Boulder County Public Health. We also worked with kids who had been unhoused, right, through the Together program. And so that's real, and kids with disabilities through Expand. So that's how we start, by choosing who we're going to work with. Our second principle is to meet young people where they are, and that's both figuratively and literally. So literally, and this was Kathy's classroom, that's how I met her. She was a teacher I worked with at Whittier. We bring the adults into the kids' space, right? There are power dynamics there, and so we like to give kids the power so they're on a more equal playing field in terms of equity, right? And if we're going to bring kids out into public adult spaces, we're going to darn well prepare them so that they feel supported and ready to be in those spaces. And metaphorically, talking about where we are, if we are talking about a very triggering issue, then what are we doing to take care of ourselves and our young people so we're not being extractive and we're being reciprocal in our work? Next principle is creating an asset-based engagement versus a deficit-based one. I'm curious, can someone say what asset-based work is? Does anyone know? I can tell you, but I want to see if someone wants to share. Yes, Kate.
Building on what people already have and can bring, that everybody has unique skills or talents or ideas, and then they can bring that to the table.
Exactly, building on what we have and what is great about us, right? You can look at a really messy room in a house that has pots and pans everywhere and say, this family is completely disorganized, they're not taking care of their kids. Or you can look at that same house and say, wow, look how hard they're working to try and provide food for the family, right? That's an asset versus a deficit-based way of working. And so that is what we do. We build upon kids' lived experiences, upon their skills and interests, and upon their culture and language. We often try and bring in cultural activities that validate and amplify the amazing cultures our kids represent. Yeah.
Can I maybe try to change to a word that we use a lot from deficit-based into asset-based? So I belong to some communities that I consider marginalized, and I have always had a weird relationship with that word. And until I took my permaculture design course. And the permaculture design course, the values will live with the margin. Because my some people make sure I'm telling the truth. You know, it's like ecotones. It's like when two communities come together, there's the most diversity and the most resilience. So that changed my perception of the word marginalized. So if we think about these communities, marginalized not as like, oh, they're just deficit-based, and we looked at them as thriving, rich, abundant, then I am okay with that word. So I think it's a word that we can use an example between asset-based and deficit.
I love it. Thank you for bringing that up. Beautiful. And such a beautiful illustration of it. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to pass it to Kathy.
So principle 4 is all about making sure that when we go out and work with children and youth that we're using a variety of methods, right? And we all know that everyone learns differently, right? Adults and children and youth. So this next section goes through a few of those. Now, we start with traditional methods because likely you know some of these methods and use some of these methods, but we'd like you to consider like choosing questions that are accessible to many when using these, or easy vocabulary, or shorter surveys, right? You can still do these, and from time to time we still do these, but we do it with a little bit of a flair, right? This was an example from OSMP Master Plan in 2018, I think, and we were asked by the department to take the snapshot tool on the right-hand side, which was a very heavily academic language poster for adults, and do some activities with children and youth. And so we simplified this document on the left-hand side, and I can tell you it became so successful even with adults, because even adults looked at the right-hand side and said, not so accessible, right? So this is a really good example of how sometimes we can help support the bridge between adult and youth and young people, right? Photo voice with red and green frames. So red and green frames made out of cardboard or painted picture frames. And this is just a really simple technique that you can use to find out what kids think is really valuable or important to them in their community. So you flip the green frame over and it's red, flip the red over, it's green. So partners can go out into a space and have a camera and capture things like this to show what they feel.
Green things that they like.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Erica. Yes, green things that they like, red not so much, right? So stop lights, stop signs, right? And then here's another technique, drawing with sentence stems. The one on the left was, I believe, the Wonderland Lake area. In the future, I would like blank, because blank, and then you note sort of the age also, right? I love this answer. Why do you want that? Because I forgot. That's something that, teachers in the classroom, see a lot. And then on the right-hand side, my favorite place to go in Boulder is blank because blank, and that we use that for the child-friendly city map. But this is actually a pretty simple strategy that people forget that they can use in engagements, and children and youth know this structure. They know sentence stems, right? And those with less English feel comfortable filling in the sentence, or they can use their primary language. It's a really nice tool to use. A visual preference survey, maybe you've done this before. We usually start out with a slide deck with choices. This example is choose your favorite hangout spot, right? And in that slide deck, you have all the different choices that you're asking students. If they have a set of clickers like they do in high school, then, they do it digitally and they'll click on in real time, right? They can give their choices in real time and it'll say, 87% likes this hangout spot, right? But in the elementary and middle classrooms, usually they don't have a set of clickers, and so we print off the choices in sort of poster size and put those around the room, give students sticky dots, right, colored dots, and then you invite them to do a gallery walk, and they just walk around the room as if they were in a museum, a little gallery walk, and they put their dots on what their preferences are, right? So another pretty simple way, fast, easy way to find out what's important. Place It by James Rojas. We're going to be doing that in a moment. You're going to be getting busy very soon. Mostly I just want to say that James Rojas is an urban planner who does a lot of this work with children and youth and families. And essentially, you ask a prompt and then you build with found objects to sort of answer the prompt. Okay? And we'll do that in a moment. Principle 5 is being transparent about process and outcomes. Pictures here are from the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan some years back, and sometimes we get folks who say, well, wait a minute, children and youth can't, participate and give you opinions about a comprehensive plan, can they? But the answer is absolutely, absolutely they can. And they also want to know how their ideas were used. We find this principle especially important when we have a project, let's say like reimagining policing, or the healing project that we did related to King Soopers tragedy. When we go through phases in a long period of time, we come back to the group to say, here's where we are. This is what's been decided so far. Here's what they've heard. And that's all about being transparent about the process and the outcomes. And then the last principle really is just about reflecting, evaluating, and adapting. This high school student is sharing out their model, and you might be able to make out the fact that there's adult decision makers in the room. And Mara alluded to this earlier, is that part of our cycle, our process, is after students have really researched and decided what recommendations they have for the project, we often make sure that there's a share out event with adult decision makers in the room. And I know many of you have been to those. And if you haven't, please join us. It gives a legitimacy to those students, and our research shows that those who experience having adult decision makers in the room actually feel like their voices were heard to a greater extent, right? And I see a lot of nodding, like that makes sense, doesn't it? Right? And then the other bit about this is we're always sort of evaluating and reflecting on our own practice, like what went well? What could we have improved on? What do they need more of? And so we're going to be doing a plus delta at the end of today. Okay. So here they are, the 6 keys. Start with equity, meet where they are, think about asset-based, be transparent, use a variety of methods, and then always reflect and adapt. Questions? It's kind of fast. Yeah, Ryan?
I know many city staff are used to communicating and outreaching to adults. And do you have any recommendations for the best ways for city staff to be connecting with children?
That's a Mara question.
Oh, it's a hard question. I think one thing that potentially eventually Yoab could even be doing, and I think they do it, but even more of it, is really, but you'd have to do a huge communication campaign of really having Yoab be as the place where kids can learn what's happening, and they're tweeting out, or not tweeting out, but using different social media, Snapchat, to say, this is what's happening. But there needs to be a lot more work around that. It's a lot of work to create that build up and buy-in. We share out, so we're always happy to share out. We also will personally track down kids we've worked with. It is not easy. So we could have a whole meeting just to talk about how do you communicate it out? Sometimes through the schools it does work, but it's tricky. So it's a really great question. It's an evolving question. And literally the times we've had most success is when we had elementary school teachers who still knew their kids and could physically call them up, which is very time consuming, but it's the reality.
We'll keep working on it.
And Yoab is Youth Opportunities
Oh,
Advisory
sorry.
Board.
Yeah.
With the city.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Ready to interact a little bit?
Okay. All right, so it's going to be your turn now. So as we said, this is an activity that James Rojas developed this activity because he's an urban planner, and he was frustrated that his people were not being included in all these decision making, right? So he identifies as gay, and he identifies as Latino from Los Angeles, and he wasn't seeing either of those groups at city meetings for planning. So he developed these kits, and so this is what we're going to do here. We are going to give you, let me just see what happens here. You're going to choose a partner, okay? So someone next to you or a partner, and you are going to follow when I say this prompt, and we're going to give you maybe 10 minutes. We're going to cut it shorter just to keep us moving. We're going to give you a few minutes to build your ideal child-friendly city together, okay? Now the objects you have, They're not Legos. They don't fit together neatly. No one is a bad artist, okay? Everyone can succeed here. So in a second, I'm going to ask you to pour out the toys on your table and build, okay? So you can start building.
And Mara, can I?
Yep.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay, sorry, the teacher Nate couldn't stand. Okay, I just want to tell you that it really works well to do your turn and talk partner, so the person that's sitting at your hip. And then these are your placemats. So it just helps define the space. Children and youth, they like that. And so you're going to build with your found objects.
We're going to ask for volunteers to share what they built. And Kathy is going to scribe. And the process we're doing is something you can use as well. You can also borrow these kits from us. Okay.
So,
building up to today, what does it actually mean for the city of Boulder? First, why should we even bother, right? Because we are doing some great work already in terms of child and youth voice. YOAB, Youth Opportunities Advisory Board, does a great job hearing from our high school kids. So what is different about bringing on this UNICEF USA Child-Friendly Cities framework and recognition process, which I will explain will take about 3 years? Well, first, it's new structural support around child-friendly cities. It's actually going to bring together city departments, schools, nonprofits to align our efforts and reach populations experiencing structural and systemic inequalities or inequities. So it's really much more robust in this way. It also does formal recognition for the great current work that we're doing as a city and a community, right? Like we get to kind of toot our own horns. And then finally, our goal and hope is that we're going to increase impact, and you'll see we actually measure impact along the way. Okay, so I'm just going to show you, this is a very high level view of what we're doing, and then we're going to break it down after, okay? But essentially, we work on joining the CFCI, saying that we're a part of it. Then we set up structures where we hear from the community, and we have teams that are helping guide this process. Next, we do what's called a situation analysis. So what is the situation of children and youth in our community? How are they doing, or how are they not doing? Then, with young people and city and nonprofits, we develop a youth action plan that will be adopted within the city. And also our partners will be a part of that process. And we're also going to update the budget to reflect that. Like, what do we need to do to actually make this happen? Then we get to implementation. Okay, we've set up this plan. Let's actually do it and measure, are we doing what we say we're going to do, by setting up benchmarks and periodically reviewing and evaluating. And also this will be woven into the comprehensive plan as well. So again, it's in another city location. And then after all of that, we get recognized and we get to get the full stamp of being a child-friendly city initiative. So what I'll say about this is that it's really about the process. To me, this should never end, because we're always checking in on how we're doing and measuring and taking collective action. And it's not just those of us in the room today. It's centering the voices of our young people. They're part of the process throughout. It's also our local partners. The business community should be a part of this. The schools should be a part of it. Our nonprofit partners should be a part. And so now I'm going to get into the detailed version of like, okay, what does it actually mean? What are each of these parts? And you're actually going to get to experience some of this today. Okay. And I'll just say, too, that Darren is my counterpart in terms of doing this on the city side. So we're sort of doing the Growing Up Boulder side, and she's doing the city side, and together, and with our staff executive committee of some of the leaders of departments, we're really making this happen. So that includes Elizabeth on the executive committee. So basically here, it's saying, are we ready to do this? We did a whole assessment it was a year and a half ago. And then we're actually signing a memorandum of understanding between Growing Up Boulder, the City of Boulder, and UNICEF USA. And we're identifying key teams that are going to make all of this happen. So there are those of us on the ground actually working on this day to day, but we also have guidance from our executive team. And then we're also looking for staff champions. So I have a little commercial for all of you. Okay, so staff champions your role would be, should you apply to do this, You'd help inform the development of the citywide youth plan. You would share relevant data back and forth. You would liaise between departments, partners, and young people. You would participate in the youth action planning process, and then you would help build consensus and momentum, okay? And the time commitment is approximately 3 to 5 half-day workshops over the course of 2 years, and minimal homework in between. If you are interested, you need to talk with your department head or communicate with them, and ultimately they will then put in recommendations, and we will then have our staff champions working group and have a meeting sometime in the next month or two. Did I miss anything, Darren?
No, I was just going to point out that Edgar was the very first person to be selected as our staff champion. So.
Yeah, it's so exciting. All right. Thank you for being a role model, Edgar.
Yes.
Okay. Step 2, community engagement, okay? So this piece is when we get our nonprofit and education leaders, our business owners, our city officials, and our young people ourselves who will be informed. Some of them will be from YOAB, so from the Youth Opportunities Advisory Board, as well as 2 8th graders. They're going to serve as the task force, and that task force is going to be the one making a lot of the big decisions and holding us accountable along the way. Like, they're going to be doing the work, and so it's multi-generational. And step 3 is a situation analysis. So there are 2 parts of this, right? There's first the government assessment, which I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like. That's collecting data that's already been collected, numbers, and really looking at choosing from a big set of indicators and saying, okay, what's most relevant to our community? What do we want to be measuring and seeing how we're doing? And then the task force is going to guide this part. The second piece, actually, of the situation analysis is actually a community assessment piece where we talk to kids. We talk to those of you who work with kids, right? Maybe if you're a family resource school, it might be you that we talk to, or a teacher. And we get your input about what you think the state of children's needs are, okay? Just when we're measuring these, I'm talking about indicators, there are 5 goal areas that we are using in this country to evaluate how our kids are doing. It's safety and inclusion, children's participation, equitable social services, safe living environments, and play and leisure. And we have a lot more details on that. I won't get into it now, but just know those are and you're actually going to get to experience them in a second. This is, again, let your eyes go fuzzy, don't read the small print. But I wanted to show you what San Francisco has done for their government assessment. They created this beautiful dashboard that really shows, like, what is the data we want to know about our kids so that we can measure it and see how we're doing. A community assessment, these are some examples actually from different countries where they've tested out this tool, is an interactive survey where you go to the kids and it's designed by ages to ask them to rate how they're doing. And that's what you're going to get to do in a second. Okay? And these are the different groups that participate. Parents of children 0 through 5, children ages 6 through 8, children ages 9 through 12, young people 13 through 18, and then service providers. And there are it's the same set of questions with different instruments for each one that's age appropriate and has been tested worldwide. And then we, again, elevate the voices of those who are most impacted by inequities in our systems. That's who we're going to start with hearing from. Those are the target groups. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Luciana, who is going to actually lead you through you being the young people or parents or service providers.
Different papers that look like those posters. All of those are different, so make sure that you have one. Okay? Each person at each table should have one paper. Take a moment to look at it. Notice the age group and the goal on top. Then read each statement in the table and vote on your paper using a pen or a pencil.
Yeah, so notice at the top which assessment age level you have. And then go through each of the questions and put a check mark where you think it's true.
As if you were that, so you're role playing. So you might be a parent or you might be a 6-year-old. So answer the best you can as that person. Questions? That make sense?
One more minute to finish voting on your paper. When you're done voting, on your tables you'll find the dotted stickers. So use these dotted stickers to bring your vote to your poster. Make sure you read the age and the goal area. So bring your vote.
We'll have Yoab, and we will also have others in the community develop this local action plan and through intergenerational workshops. And the action plan will identify the goal areas that we're working on, and then actions we want to take and strategies for that and ways to measure it.
So, Mara, for
Yeah.
example, when we do the community assessment, it might show that children and youth are really, really concerned about safety, or homelessness, or nature, or some other aspect. So the local action plan will look at the data, decide on the priorities, and then construct strategies to reach those goals.
A question, yeah.
How do you weight the different perspectives? So obviously you want the kid's point of view, but you're also collecting data from parents and caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you prioritize? And maybe they say the same thing, but maybe they don't.
Yeah, well, so there's actually a sort of formula for how many you're looking for. Given our size city, we're supposed to sample about 450 people, and it's broken down by different ages and all this. They have it very precise. I actually think we're going to collect a lot more information than that. And we have the government assessment and this. It's up to that task force and intergenerational team to wrestle with these questions, right? So it's a really good question. There's not a clear answer, but that group is going to have to wrestle with it. And that's why it's a group of people deciding, not you or me, or, they're going to have to work through it. So good question. So then we get to implement the plan, and it's a collective impact model, and we're going to coordinate implementation of it, and then again be measuring success. And UNICEF is requiring an outside evaluator to come in as well now to see, like, how are we doing? Are we making progress? Now, are we going to suddenly make our community perfectly safe and everything is just like mostly true for everything? Probably not. Are we making progress towards it and looking at that? That is our goal, and really keeping that action going. And then we get to celebrate. We get to get official recognition and really celebrate all the hard work that we've done and keep this going. So with that, I wanted to see if there are any questions about this process or any of this last chunk.
It was really fast, and so what questions do you have?
Yeah. Claudia.
I guess for me, filling out the last one,
Safe living environments, youth 13 through 18?
yeah, I wonder, do you guys specifically locate exactly what neighborhood you're asking those questions at, or is it as a city as a whole?
That is,
We just have
yeah.
neighborhoods that are not doing well.
That is a fabulous question. And I think actually we want to make sure we're centering those neighborhoods where maybe they're not feeling like they have those resources, but also to be aware of it. One of the ways you can do this is you can choose up to 25